So once you have written your criteria, there may be a time during the course of the study where you consider changing the criteria. Can you do that? Well, the short answer is yes. But really the answer is yes, but. So you can change your eligibility criteria once the study has started. This would result in a protocol change. So keep in mind, anytime you make substantial changes to your protocol, such as eligibility, inclusion, or exclusion criteria, you have to go back to the IRB for approval. Every center has to go back to their IRB for approval. It's very costly. So if you're looking at $1,500 per protocol amendment and you have even 10 sites, that's $15,000. Multiply that times 5 or 7, and you're looking at $100,000 for protocol changes. So it can be very expensive. And this is why you need to spend a lot of time on your criteria up front. However, there are situations that demand a change in criteria. You really want to only change them for safety reasons. You may narrow them if new safety information comes out. So if you are using a well-tested intervention but in a new manner, and during the course of your trial, new information comes out from, say, the FDA about depression issues associated with your intervention, you may want to add an inclusion criteria that is specific for that, or an exclusion criteria specific to that situation. You can consider slightly widening criteria as necessary, but usually only widen to improve recruitment, and usually only on variables that are not necessarily associated with the outcome. So if you had previously indicated that you would recruit participants from the age of 40 to 60, could you potentially increase the recruitment to 65? So historically, if doing an intervention for working age participants, people under the age of 65 were excluded. That's the standard retirement age. However, in our time now, people are working much later, so they may actually still be full-time employed. So rather than simply cutting recruitment off at a specific age, if you're looking at some kind of economic intervention for those who are working, then you can think about potentially asking them if they're full-time employed and if they plan to be full-time employed for the duration of the trial rather than cutting them off at a specific age. But moving age up to a higher level also opens up those participants to other concomitant issues such as additional medications, diseases that come with general aging. People will potentially be offered early retirement packages if that's the study that you're running. So think about those needs before you broaden them. And you should really only broaden or change or narrow your criteria if there's new vetted, validated, published information about the intervention. If you are running a clinical trial that has a data and safety monitoring board or an external safety monitor, which almost every trial should have, consult with that board, get their approval, vet the criteria, and then you need to schedule that change at a time when it would be beneficial for the study. So perhaps in a lull in recruitment, which usually happens in the summer and over the late fall, early winter holidays. That could be when you put the protocol change through. Remember, if you change any of your data collection forms, which is where you'd be capturing the eligibility criteria, you would also have to push that change through study-wide as well. You would also have to educate all of your study staff and team on what the new criteria are. So that may involve newsletters, webinars, perhaps an investigator meeting. So keep in mind, when you make a change to your eligibility criteria, there are many downstream changes. It's not to say that particularly if it's a safety concern that you don't have to make the change, but just think further down the line than simply saying, yes, let's change that. So if you are going to make a change to the criteria, especially widening them, you have the chance to create what's called a cohort effect. That means the moment that you start allowing participants to be recruited into a study under a different set of criteria, especially if it has a big impact on increasing recruitment, those participants are inherently different than prior participants. They do not have that condition that was previously included or excluded. So you've introduced a new confounding variable. You've also increased the variability. Cohort effects can be hard to spot until you're further along into the trial and sometimes even too late to fix the problem. So be aware, particularly with things like age or concomitant diseases, that you may be creating a cohort effect, and your treatment effect at the end of the day may not be due to the intervention. It could be due to the fact that you have two different classes of participants. Now, randomization should work, hopefully. But if you change a criteria very late in the game and you only have, say, fewer than 100 people to randomize, then you may end up with imbalance across the criteria in your intervention arms. So be very aware of changing criteria midstream in a study.